Hi there. Well, continuing on with William Saroyan's The Human Comedy. In our last episode, Homer was on his way to school and talked to an old man about rabbits and the 220 low hurdles. So, beginning now with Chapter 10, Ancient History. On the track of the athletic field of Ithaca High School, the hurdles were set for the 220-yard low hurdle race. Now, in the morning, 4 boys were running a practice race. Each ran well, under control, and each hurdled with good form. Coach Byfield, stopwatch in hand, came up to the winner. "That was better, Ackley," he said to a boy who was surely not common, but for all that surely not terribly uncommon either. He was a boy who had the resigned manner of one whose family has not in recent decades been in want of food, clothing, or shelter, and who, on occasion, entertained others of similar good fortune. "You've got a lot to learn yet," the coach said to the boy, "but I think you will be able to win the race this afternoon." "I'll try my best, sir," the boy said. "Yes, I know," the coach said. "You won't be having any competition today, but you will have plenty of it 2 weeks from now in the Valley meet. Go to the shower now and take it easy until this afternoon." "Yes, sir," the boy replied, and he moved away, then stopped suddenly. "Excuse me, sir," he said. "How is my time?" "Not bad," the coach said, "but not too good either. I wouldn't worry about the time, though. Just run the race I've taught you to run, and I think you'll come in first." The other 3 runners were over to one side, watching and listening. "He may act like a sissy," one of the boys said to the others, "but he always comes in first. What's the matter with you, Sam?" "What's the matter with me?" Sam said. "What's the matter with you? Why don't you beat him?" "I came in second." "Second's no better than third," the other boy said. "Hubert Ackley the third, beating us," Sam said. "We ought to be ashamed of ourselves." "Sure," the second boy said, "but we've got no alibis. He just runs a better race, that's all." The coach turned to these 3, and in an altogether different tone of voice, he said, "Okay, you guys, keep moving. You're not so good you can stand around and be proud of yourselves. Get to your marks and give it another try." Without a word, the boys went to their marks, and the coach sent them off for another run of the race. After they began to run, the coach decided he would run them a couple more times before the afternoon meet. He seemed to want Hubert Ackley III to win the race. The ancient history classroom was swiftly filling as the old teacher, Miss Hicks, waited for the final bell in the kind of order and quiet which in her class was the sign for the beginning of another stab at the problem of trying to educate, if not entertain, the boys and girls of Ithaca, now at high school and soon, at least theoretically, to be ready for the world. Homer Macaulay, troubled by something that bordered on a state of adoration, studied a girl named Helen Elliot, who walked from the door to her desk. Without a doubt, this girl was the most beautiful girl in the world. Besides that, she was a snob, which Homer refused to believe was natural or permanent. Even so, and even though he worshipped her, the bitterest enemy of his school life was this snobbery of Helen Elliot. Following her came Hubert Ackley III. When Hubert reached Helen, the 2 whispered a moment, irritating Homer very much. The final bell rang, and the teacher said, "All right, silence, please. Who's absent?" "I am," a boy said. His name was Joe Terra Nova, and he was the low comedian of the class. The 4 or 5 of Joe's faithful, the members of his comic religious cult, his worshippers, were instant in their response and appreciation of his swift and goofy wit. But Helen Elliot and Hubert Ackley turned and frowned at these holy rollers of the classroom, these bad-mannered offspring of slum dwellers. This in turn angered Homer so much that when everyone else had ceased laughing, he burst out with an artificial "ha ha ha," which he sent almost directly into the faces of Hubert, whom he despised, and Helen, whom he adored. Then he turned swiftly to Joe and said, "As for you, Joe, shut up when Miss Hicks is talking." "Now, none of your nonsense, Joseph," Miss Hicks said, and turning to Homer, "or yours, young man." She paused a moment to look the class over. Now, she said, we will take up the Assyrians where we left off yesterday. I want everyone's undivided attention, everyone's continuous undivided attention. First, we will read from our ancient history textbook. Then we will have an oral discussion of what we have read. The low comedian could not resist this opportunity for horseplay. No, Miss Hicks, he suggested, let's not discuss it orally. Let's discuss it silently, so I can sleep. Again, the faithful roared with laughter, and the snobs turned away, disgusted. Miss Hicks did not answer the comedian immediately, for on one hand it was difficult not to enjoy the swiftness of his wit, and on the other hand it was equally difficult to know how to cope with him so that the wit would continue. And yet it was absolutely necessary to keep him in line. At last she spoke. You must not be unkind, Joseph, she said, especially when it happens that you are right, and I am wrong. Well, I'm sorry, Miss Hicks, the comedian said. I guess I just can't help it. Oral discussion? What other kind of discussion is there? But, okay, I'm sorry. Now, with a kind of spoofing himself and of his own presumptuousness, he waved to her, saying patronizingly, Go ahead, Miss Hicks. Thank you, the teacher said. Now, everybody, wide awake. Wide awake, Joe said. Look at them. They're all half asleep. Even though the old teacher was enjoying Joe's sallies, it was necessary for her to say, Another interruption, Joseph, and I will have to ask you to go to the principal's office. I'm only trying to get myself a little education, the comedian said. But just look at them. They're half asleep, aren't they? And then he surveyed the faces of the pupils of the classroom and added, All my pals, too. Great baseball players. Ah, shut up, Joe, Homer said to his friend. You don't have to show off all the time. Everybody knows how smart you are. Not another word, Miss Hicks said. Not another word from either one of you. Now, she said, turn to page 117, paragraph 2. Everyone turned to this page and found the place. Ancient history, the teacher continued, may seem to be a dull and unnecessary study. At a time like the present, when so much history is going on in our own world, another world, long since ended, may seem useless to study and understand. Such a notion, however, is incorrect. It is very important for us to know of other times, other cultures, other peoples, and other worlds. Who will volunteer to come to the head of the class and read? 2 girls and Hubert Ackley III raised their hands. Joe, the comedian, turned to Homer and said, Look at that guy, will you? One of the 2 girls who had volunteered, of the 2 girls who had volunteered, the teacher selected Helen Elliot, the beautiful and snobbish. Homer, fascinated, watched her walk to the front of the class. She just stood there, being very beautiful for a moment, and then, in the purest and most attractive voice imaginable, she began to read, while Homer marveled at the incredible spectacle of such a body and such a voice. The Assyrians, Helen Elliot read, long of nose, hair, and beard, developed Nineveh in the north to a position of great power. After many vicissitudes with the Hittites, Egyptians, and others, they conquered Babylon under the reign of Tiglath-Pileser I in 1100 BC. For centuries afterward, the power veered between Nineveh, built of stone, and Babylon, built of brick. There is no connection between the names Syrian and Assyrian, and the Assyrians were to fight the Syrians until Tiglath-Pileser III conquered them and exiled the 10 lost tribes of Israel. Helen paused for a fresh supply of breath with which to read the next paragraph, but before she could begin again, Homer Macaulay said, How about Hubert Ackley III? Who did he conquer, and what did he do? The well-bred boy got to his feet in a kind of decent bitterness. Miss Hicks, he said very earnestly, I cannot allow such willful mischievousness to go uncorrected or unpunished. I must ask you to order Mr. Macaulay to go to the principal's office, or, he said very deliberately, I shall have to take the matter into my own hands. Homer jumped out of his seat. Ah, shut up, he said. Your name is Hubert Ackley III, isn't it? Well, what did you ever do? Or for that matter, what did Hubert Ackley II ever do? Or what did Hubert Ackley I ever do? He paused a moment and turned to Miss Hicks and then to Helen Elliot. "I think that's a good, intelligent question," he said. Then he turned to Hubert Ackley and repeated the question. "What did they do?" "Well," Hubert said, "at least no Ackley has ever been a common—" He stopped to seek an appropriately withering word and then said, "Fanfaron," a word nobody else in Ithaca had ever heard before. "Fanfaron?" Homer said. He turned to the teacher. "What does that mean, Miss Hicks?" he said, and she was not ready for a definition of the word. Homer turned quickly to Hubert Ackley and went on. "Listen, number 3, don't be calling me names I never even heard before," he said. "A fanfaron," Hubert said, "is a hoodlum, a braggart." And he stopped to find another lower word. "Ah, shut up," Homer said. He turned to Helen Elliot and smiled the famous Macaulay smile. "Fanfaron," he repeated. "What kind of cussing is that?" Then he sat down. Helen Elliot waited for a sign from the teacher to go on reading. Miss Hicks, however, did not give the sign. Finally, Homer understood. He got to his feet and said to Hubert Ackley III, "All right, I apologize. I'm sorry." "Thank you," the well-bred boy said, and sat down. The history teacher looked about the room a moment and then said, "Homer Macaulay and Hubert Ackley will remain in their seats after school." "But Miss Hicks," Homer said, "what about the school track meet?" "I'm not interested in the school track meet," the teacher said. "The development of your manners is as important as the development of your bodies, perhaps more important." "Miss Hicks," Hubert Ackley said, "Ithaca High School is counting on me to win the 220 low hurdle race this afternoon, and 2 weeks from now meet to make a good showing in the Valley track meet. I'm afraid Coach Byfield will insist on my taking part." "I don't know about Coach Byfield insisting," Homer said, "but I'm going to run the 220 low hurdles this afternoon. That's all." Hubert Ackley looked at Homer. "I had no idea," he said, "that you had gone out for the race." "Well," Homer said, "I have." He turned to the teacher. "Miss Hicks, if you let us go this time, I promise never again to make trouble or to be disobedient or anything. And so does Hubert." He turned to Hubert and said, "Don't you?" "Yes, I do, Miss Hicks," Hubert said. "You will both stay in after school," the ancient history teacher said. "Helen, please continue to read." "The allied armies," Helen read, "of the Chaldeans from the south and the Medes and the Persians from the north overcame the Assyrian Empire, and Nineveh bowed to their might. Nebuchadnezzar II ruled over the second Babylonian Empire. Then came the great Cyrus, king of Persia, with his hordes of invaders. His conquest, however, was only one of a cycle, for the descendants of this army would be later subjugated by Alexander the Great." Homer, disgusted now, tired from the work of the night before, and lulled by the sweet voice of the girl he believed was made only for himself, slowly dropped his head on his folded arms and began to enjoy something almost the equivalent of sleep. Still, he could hear the girl reading. "From this melting pot," she said, "the world has a heritage of great value. The Mosaic Code of the Bible owes some of its principles to some of the laws formulated by Hammurabi, who was called the lawgiver. From their system of arithmetic, in which they used the multiple of 12 as well as our familiar 10, we derive our 60 minutes to the hour and 360 degrees to the circle. Arabia gave us our numerals, which are still called Arabic, to distinguish them from the Roman numeral system of notation. The Assyrians invented the sundial. The modern apothecary symbols and the signs of the zodiac originated with the Babylonians. Comparatively recent excavations in Asia Minor have revealed that there was a magnificent empire there." "A magnificent empire?" Homer dreamed. "Where? Ithaca? Ithaca in California? Away out to hell and gone? Without any great people, without any great discoveries, without sundials, without numerals, without zodiacs, without humor, without anything. Where was this great empire?" He decided to sit up again and look around. He saw only the face of Helen Elliot, perhaps the greatest empire of them all, and he heard her wondrous voice, perhaps the greatest achievement of pathetic mankind. The Hittites, she said, had swung down the coast and over into Egypt. They mingled their blood with the Hebrew tribes and gave to the Hebrews the Hittite nose. Helen stopped reading and returned to the ancient history teacher. "That's the end of the chapter, Miss Hicks," she said. "Very well, Helen," Miss Hicks said. "Thank you for an excellent reading. You may be seated."